بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله يا رب العالمين، خالق الخلائق أجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، واللعن الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. We offer thank to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all the blessings that we receive from Him. We also convey our greeting and salutations to the Holy Prophet of Islam and his pure progenies. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون. It is among His signs that He has created for you partners, pairs, wives, from among yourselves, so that you may find tranquility and peace in them. He has created love and kindness between you. Surely in this there are signs for people who reflect. Rum, verse number 21. To follow the usual pattern, I began with a recap of the major points that I covered last night. And then I would shift to a critical issue that our community somehow does not pay attention to. Last night, I explained that Sunday, when we had a program at the Islamic Center, also Sunday night, another brother came to me. Both two issues were raised. Number one, can we really start taking the responsibility of taking the message to the larger community when we have not been able to successfully organize our own community and put our own house in order? When there is rift, disunity, differences of opinion, whether it's theological or personal opinion, etc., etc., can we really go outside and try to propagate about Islam? My answer to the brother was that yes, we can. They are not mutually exclusive. If we intend to wait here until we create that ideal society, it will never happen, and then go outside. However, we have to be mindful of the crisis that we are dealing with, and in the list of priorities, spend some time trying to fix and correct some of these issues. And I briefly touched upon a point that from a community perspective, there are a number of issues that are critical that must be present. A preferred or desired community must rest on the concept of Tawheed, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes the central issue in the community. And as such, once Allah becomes the dominant factor, where everything walks around it, naturally the concept of justice, respect, peace, tranquility, and everything else falls into perspective. The second question that was raised was more of a strategy. How do we go about it? Yes, we understand that there are certain values in, say, whether it is the uprising of Karbala or any other values in Islam, that the youth may not agree with the traditional or classical presentation. How do we go about explaining it to them or articulating a language which be useful? Sisters, please, could I ask everyone to remain silent for nearly, another 45 minutes, and inshallah we'll finish. In the context of strategy, how do we develop or articulate a language that we will be able to talk to the youth or the community at large? This is the central issue that I want to focus upon tonight. If we look at the Holy Quran, we come across repeatedly the name of a number of family structures that Quran reminds us, either as an ideal preferred community or family structure, or families that have had some kind of problem. For example, we have Al Musa, Al Harun, Al Imran, relationship between Luqman and his son, Yaqub and Yusuf, Musa and his mother, Isa and Maryam, Ayyub and his wife, Lut and his wife, Pharaoh and his wife, Dawood and his son Sulaiman, etc., etc. These stories exist in the Holy Quran. We are being reminded by these stories is to look at them, analyze them, and see whether we can learn from them. If they have made a mistake in their lives, can we learn from their mistakes? A classic story is Yaqub and Yusuf. That if you look in even the Old Testament, they talk about it. How one should not, as a father, one should not single out one of his children as the preferred child at the expense of the other children. This is something that the psychology of parenting. When it comes to Ayyub and his son and his wife, how to have relationship with the wife when there are some physical problems or psychological issues involved. Musa and his mother, the absolute trust of mother when it comes to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you just let go of your child and we will undertake to return the child back to you in the light of the crisis that exists. If we ask Quran, or if we look at the verses in the Holy Quran, to see whether there are any ideas being presented as the preferred family structure, this verse becomes the classic in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, it is among His signs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for you pairs, partners, wives, لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, first condition, that لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, that the wife becomes the center and the source of tranquility within the family. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, this bondage, the chemistry must be the language of love and affection, and the whole structure must be based on what we call parity and to being compatible. Both partners within the institution of marriage are compatible and complementing each other. This is something that we have in our traditions as well, that if somebody marries, half of the deen is saved. I know there are those that may, somehow, internet, they have various comments about this hadith, but we leave that for the virtual space. So, Quran is clear that for a community or an idea or a preferred marital relationship or institution of marriage, these conditions, these three conditions must be there. The absence of these makes the institution fail. At the same time, when we analyze these verses, the intimate relationship or the physical attraction is there. We see it repeatedly in the Holy Quran and a hadith being mentioned. But according to the way it's being presented, it's not the critical issue. It's a secondary issue, natural issue that we have to address. But the primary goal is something else. Islam sees the institution of marriage to be the first step towards the construction of a larger society that ultimately has the responsibility of defending justice, equity, and everything else. A society that intends, if you remember a verse in the Holy Quran that I recited a couple of nights ago, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ, we did indeed send our messengers, and we provided them with the necessary means so that they establish justice. If the social structure is primarily designated with the goal of establishing justice and defending justice from an individual state to that communal state, quantum leap is not possible. It has to be a gradual process. The gradual process is the institution of marriage. And once we look at it this way, we see everything that we want for a desired community must exist within the institution of marriage on a small scale. Tolerance must be there, respect must be there, complementing each other must be there, space for expressing opinion must be there, a symmetrical power relationship certainly not, because it negates that notion of being complementary to each other's existence. When somebody becomes the top, the authority, and somebody takes order, this interpretation of any verse in the Holy Quran negates that basic principle. The three basic principles needed within the institution of marriage. Now, why I brought this issue out, because the Brother Salman, in his question, he asked, how do we go about educating our children? I believe this is the fundamental point. Education cannot take place unless we fix the institution of marriage. Once we fix the institution of marriage, then we can talk about initiating educational program, because a marital institution that does not possess the basic requirement of what we call the preferred or the ideal community is not going to be able to become the center for bringing up and educating the next generation. So in the institution of marriage, we expect, in the same manner that we were talking a couple of nights ago, a shift in chemistry to take place and a shift in understanding. We cannot go around, because ultimately the parents are going to be the role model for the children. If the parents do not possess the necessary conditions, or they do not see things eye to eye, or each one pulls in a different direction, the notion that somehow miraculously they can create a stable relationship, that the younger generation will be educated in a way that Islam wants, is a myth. To begin with, yes, once we understand the role of family in Islam, ultimately what Islam wants is two individuals, and I have a couple of times I have mentioned this, two individuals, two eyes, that they would join together through what we call the holy matrimony, to borrow the phrase. And then over the time this chemistry work itself out, and two eyes become literally a single we. That single we that organizes the life together then they can become the role model or the institution in which then we can talk about strategy. How do we bring or develop a strategy or a way of thinking that these fundamental principles of Islam can be taught to our children. So if that's the case, to start talking about singular policy and chemistry, etc., after the institution of marriage has already established itself is too late. We really need to go back to the point where the partners are potential partners. We are searching for a partner. That's the time that we have to focus. And clearly define what are our value systems. Do we believe, are we looking for a partner purely in the physical domain, on a materialistic things, wealth, beauty, etc., etc.? Or as a human being that follow the tenets of Islam, we say that yes, physical reality matters, the spiritual dimension is critical. And how can I go around finding an individual that fulfills both sides? That chemistry that Islam talks about is not just about the physical part of it, it's the spiritual one that is critical. If we search for a partner that purely falls into one category, tomorrow when I start talking about, well, spirituality matters, and I want to guide my children towards spirituality, my partner would say, no, it doesn't. I want him or her to pray, or go to the mosque, or learn something about Islam. No, they don't. I want them to work in addition to the material well-being. I want them to focus on their spiritual well-being as well. Why should they? Let them become a doctor, engineer, and so on. That's it. The concept of success is defined purely in the materialistic sense. And then what happens when they grow older? They have no concept of Islam, nothing about the faith, nothing about values, thinking about developing a methodology now at this stage, that as a family we have failed to make these critical foundations available to them. Too late, and it's not good. You don't believe the argument? Look around. Those who came from Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, or somewhere else as youth, not within, even those who came within as a family structure, especially those who were born here, if the family had no plan for their future spiritually, they have no relationship with the spiritual dimension of Islam. It will be a struggle to bring them into the mosque or any religious institution. So marriage, like any other institution, requires planning in advance. Once the child is born and you have no plan for it, it's too late to think, particularly when there is a misconception that they have heard about the hadith from the Holy Prophet or one of the Imams that says, divide the life of a child into 3 phases. First phase is 7 years. Second phase, the second from 7 to 14. Third phase from 14 to 21. Let them play during the first phase. Those critical 7 years that they are receptive to the fundamental principles of Islam or any other faith. We ignore it because of misconception that we think we let them play. No, Hadith says use play as a methodology to communicate with them. Not let them play, don't tell them. And then the second phase, they have heard about discipline. Now, what do we understand from discipline? What our parents used to understand from discipline. Means beat them up. That's the concept. We start beating the child up. Why don't you behave this way or the other? For God's sake, you didn't lay the foundation 7 years ago. And then we expect, at the age of 14, the metamorphism to take place, the holy metamorphism to take place. From tomorrow morning, you become 14 or 15. Everything is an obligation, is wajib. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. Life becomes no, 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 no. With the absence of foundation, with the nice treatment during the second phase, we expect them to listen to us during the third phase. No wonder the kids run around. We have failed, as parents, we have failed to understand even the basic principles of hadith. That this is a psychological issue. When it talks to you about the first phase, using play as a methodology for communication, because it's intrinsic within the age, the first 7 years, for a child to be playful. Develop a language, articulate a methodology that would teach them through play what they should learn. During the second phase, when hadith says discipline, it doesn't mean the old methodology that you are familiar with. Because there is in social science, this is a topic that these days everyone talks about, that when you look at Palestinian Zionism and etc. Those who are rights being violated and tortured, they become the torturers. The Jewish community, particularly Zionism, which is a totally secular concept, they were tortured by the European. Now they've gone to the Middle East, they are torturing the rest of the community. It's a classic. Because there is no other framework of communicating with others available. Intifada, the third Intifada, is a consequence of those issues that the way they have dealt with Palestinians. The sudden explosion that takes place within our youth, it's as a consequence of failure of methodology that we really didn't spend time. We made a mistake the moment we began wandering around looking for the part. We looked for the doctor, we looked for the engineer, we looked for the physical attraction, we looked for wealth, we looked for everything else, we forgot about spirituality. And once the child is there, particularly if we follow the pattern of the first 7 years, then we are lumbered with this unique crisis that there is no resolution, there is no way. We keep asking, oh Lord, why our kids don't come to the mosque? A few years ago I went to Canada, to Ottawa, to a program, and one night one of the parents came to me and said, Mulana, I have a problem. What is it? He said, up to yesterday, I used to think that my son was very religious, did everything, prayers and everything else on time, and I was happy with it. I said, well, congratulations, tell me how you did it. He said, well, it's not the whole story. Wait, let me explain. Well, what is it? He said, last night I found out that whole thing was nothing but hype. How did you find out? Well, I used to call my son early in the morning to get up for prayer. And he would get up, offer his prayer, and then go to sleep. This morning, suddenly in the middle of the prayer, everything stopped. So I became curious and inquisitive as to why my son suddenly stopped talking. I thought he's dead. I opened his room, fast asleep. It transpired that this crafty guy had recorded the entire prayer from Adhan, Iqamah, Salat, and Tasbihat, and Ta'qibat on a tape. And when his dad called him for the prayer, he just pressed the play button and went to sleep. The poor father was grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for granting him such a child. The battery ran out, And the father found out that the whole thing was a charade. I said, how many hours qualitative time do you spend with your child? He said, Maulana, I work on this business and I leave home at 6 o'clock in the morning and he's asleep. And I come back home at 6 or 10 in the evening and he's asleep. I said, when do you see your child? Well, Sunday morning when I come in, he's going out, he says, hi dad, and that's it. I said, with this amount of time, you expect Salman Farsi? If the partners don't work, most of the crisis that we have is that if we are lucky by accident to have partners that they see things eye to eye and respect principles, internal and external factors that inshallah tomorrow night we will pay attention to them, we are lucky. It's a fluke. Otherwise, naturally, even Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq has a hadith that aptly describes this. He says, when you go around looking for your prospective partners, don't look for roses that have grown up in trash. Roses that grow up in an environment that they are not conducive to what you are looking for. The materialistically orientated requires a huge shift towards those who intend or look for partners that focus on spiritual. So when we try, as soon as somebody poses the question, okay, we have a number of youth here, how do we go about it? We really have to assess their background and their understanding. Are they prepared to comprehend these kind of things? Sometimes we really have to struggle hard to bring them in. It requires jihad. It's not just jihad of myself, jihad for our children. It's not just purely developing or articulating a language that will change the whole thing. Concepts must be understood. Parents must have to look at it, as well as the children, and work together. If parents don't understand it themselves, how can we expect the children to comprehend this? Normally, the crisis that we have that challenges our family structure, they have two sources: external sources and internal sources. Primarily external sources, here counselors, therapists, etc., they say economy, social factors, cultural factors, but particularly in the last 10 years, they have been focusing on what they call technology and the virtual space that technology is creating for members of the family, parents as well as children. Our children are quite happy to live in this virtual world. They have thousands of friends in this virtual world. None has been seen outside. Very able to communicate in this virtual world. Ask them to sit in front of you and express himself or herself. They think about 10 like before they give you one word. This like that our kids have learned, it's inability to be able to express themselves. Why? Because the mind is insufficiently, possesses what we call word power. Every time you say like, you are searching for a next word to say it. If you had it in your hand, you don't need to say like. But they are very quick. Just look at the thumb and the first finger, how quickly they type in text to express themselves. We really need to bring in, as we try to articulate the language and something for our kids, the virtual world and the technology must be brought in. You have given them all the opportunity to use it. Now it has to be used in a totally different context. Inshallah, I've already gone over the half hour. We will be able to discuss this tomorrow night and continue with the topic. I pray that inshallah we succeed in our endeavor and struggle to teach our children and at least give them some background information and foundation to support their spirituality as they try to evolve and develop in this materialistic world. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin.